Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Of course, this morning we're going to be talking about the new features in Flex2SQL version 12, which was released into beta on August 29th. And so we want to tell you some of the things that we've been doing. Actually, we've been doing quite a bit. On this slide here, we have just some of the highlights of the changes that have been made in 12. And these changes that we've made are actually very incremental in nature. We've got 4 main areas of improvement that we've worked on for version 12. The first is in the feature set. We've been adding features primarily to make the Mertech driver easier to use. But in addition to that, we're also making sure we support the latest features and all the database backends. And of course, making sure we support the latest features in VDF. So in this case, with VDF 17 support, that would be the long file name, long field name support, and some of those other changes there. The second area that we've been working on is documentation. Now, this is an area that we have been admittedly lacking on in the past, but we've actually put a lot of effort into it to improve that situation with this release and going forward. With version 12, you'll actually see a lot better organization to the documentation, and we've just made some overall improvements there, and we're going to take a look at those a bit later. The third area we've made some changes is in relation to our back-end process. Now, although most of us would admit to really enjoying a nice handmade wood product or handmade leather product, that's not something we really want with the driver. We don't want the driver to be hand-built. We want it to be something that is built on an automated basis. And so to that end, we've implemented a new build system that allows us to iterate much faster than we have in the past. This build system was put in specifically to help us in this area. The drivers are now being automatically built, and that goes for the documentation and the installer also. And after it's built, these drivers are put through an automatic testing framework, and in fact they're also put through a performance suite to make sure we haven't had any regressions in performance, and this can be done on a daily basis even. So what this means to you is that we have much more reliable builds, and of course what we're putting out is a much more uniform product. In relation to that also, we've also been spending time on what I like to call driver parity or driver versioning. We've put a lot of effort into making sure that everything works the same across all of our drivers. Now, this has involved bringing the driver versions into sync. So as part of the build system, all the drivers are built together, and we have a single release that's across all of the drivers now. And this release, as you'll see for 12, for the beta of 12, we have 12.0.5822.0. And breaking that up, we're at major version 12, and the build actually allows us to track down to the day when that build occurred. So we have the ability to go back and look at exactly when something was done, exactly what state the code was in, which means that we can support our drivers in a better fashion as we go through this. This, of course, also allows us to push out features across all 4 drivers. So along with all of these things, we did this while maintaining or improving performance across the board. So the drivers are already very fast as they stand right now. Performance isn't an area where we expect to see huge improvements since, of course, there's many years of effort that's been put into working on the performance of the drivers already. But across the board, you'll see on average about a 5% increase in performance with some very specific tests that we're showing here that are seeing performance of upwards of 70%. So we've had some very specific areas that we've put time into to make sure that we're very fast across the board for those things. So even during the beta period here, we've been working on improving the performance. Our premier feature for version 12 is Microsoft SQL Express LocalDB support. LocalDB is a small installation of SQL Express. It's about a 30 megabyte installer, and it's actually very, very fast to install and different than SQL Express. SQL Express, of course, could be used on small networks and was a network-based database product. The LocalDB version is a single user product only. And really Microsoft built it for two purposes. One of them was for developers so that they don't have to deal with necessarily having a DBA background, having those database administrator skills to just work on the development of their product. They wanted to create something that was very simple for them, but also they wanted something that could be used in single-user embedded environments. So LocalDB was their solution to this. It's very simple to deploy, and it's so simple, in fact, that we use the Flex2SQL utility in our own products now, and for the Flex2SQL migration utility, if you haven't used it before, it actually defaults to a LocalDB for the database first use. So let's go ahead and take a look at LocalDBs and see what exactly you can do with them, how they work. So, like I mentioned, very small installation. For Windows 7, the installer is a 27 megabyte installer. And once you install it, that's all you have to do. There's nothing to deal with firewall settings that you have to adjust or setting up an instance or anything like that. It just works. So what we're going to do is go ahead and set up a new database. I'm going to use a command line utility to do this. So I'm connecting, you'll see here the LocalDB /v11.0. That is the standard name for a LocalDB instance. You can create other instance names if you like. That's the built-in one that you get when you install the product. And in fact, most of the time it's the one you'll want to use. So I'm going to log into it. I'm logged in now. It's using a trusted connection, so I don't have to worry about a username and password or anything. I'm going to go ahead and just create a database. And I'm done. I've created a database. The default location when you just create a database and don't tell it where to go is actually for Windows 7 right where I'm sitting. It's right where a command prompt comes up to in your user profile folder. You'll see that now I have a bar.mdf and of course the LDF to go with it. And that's it. We're absolutely ready to go on this. So what we're going to do is convert the order entry example to use this new LocalDB that we just built. You'll see bars listed there. And what we're going to do is just select all the files, hit Convert Database, and we're going to tell it to do a Convert All. That's it. I'm now running on a LocalDB. You'll notice that I was able to do that without nearly any work at all, and of course in standard fashion with our SQL drivers, I'm going to go in here and just run the order entry example. And you'll see here it's coming up with our authentication information. And we are good to go. So using LocalDBs is really, really simple. It's very, very easy to create one from scratch and convert something to using that. So there's almost no reason not to use it. It's just too easy. In fact, we'll show you another location where we're using it here. In our Flex to Crystal product, there is a 17.0 workspace that we have. And so what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and open that workspace and show you how that's set up here. So that's installed under the Documents folder, Flex to Crystal, example application. And you'll see here that we ship with this empty sample database here. And no DAT files or anything. This is the whole thing set up in this fashion. And in fact, this database, if you notice, when I come into this list here, you'll notice that empty sample isn't listed here at all. So that database has not actually been attached on this LocalDB at all. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how easy it is to work with these LocalDBs by just running the property tracker. Oh, here. First we need to go in. Here we go. So you can see here I have a sample attached here. Let's go ahead. Oh, it's amazing how this stuff doesn't work when you change something around, huh? Let's go in here and open up the empty sample. Select our workspace. Okay. There we go. Missed one of the files, taking it off here. So you can see here I'm now running our example application on that same LocalDB that I had just set up right before here. So we're going to go in and just run a Flex Crystal report. So this allows you to do things where situations where you may want to ship a single user application that you don't want to have this huge burden of dealing with all of the various files that you may need to touch through for your product. And of course, it enables other things along the way. For instance, in this case I'm using Crystal Reports with it, but you can very easily use other tools with the LocalDB because it's just a standard SQL Server that's new for SQL Server 2012. It's a version of SQL Server 2012 that you can use with any products that support that. So all of a sudden your product becomes something that can be enabled from other tools very easily. And of course it makes it easier to ship because there's many fewer files to deal with along the way. So this is one of our premier features of the version 12 drivers. So now let's go back in here. And the next item we're going to take a look at that's again related to Microsoft SQL Server 2012 is Synonyms. Now Synonyms are a bit of a unique item. They're almost like an alias on the server. They allow you to access a table from another database without having to use a fully qualified name. And the use cases for them are a little bit unique. If you're familiar with the Unix background, some people think of them as like a symbolic link. So let's take a look at one possible use for a synonym. This is something that is already present in Oracle. Microsoft SQL has just gotten support for this. So again, this is another Microsoft SQL edition for us here. So let me switch over here. And what we're going to do we're going to come in here and attach a separate database. Okay, so now we have a foo and a bar database. And we're actually not going to use that. What we're going to do is start up our SQL command again here. And in this case, let me describe a scenario for you here. So we're going to do this with the order entry example, but let's take a scenario where you have a database, maybe even a LocalDB in this case for your development, and another database on your network, maybe a production database for instance, is having some issue, and you want to test on your development machine against that, one table, for instance, in that other database. Maybe your users table is having a password issue or something like that. That's one possible use of synonyms. Now, everything that you can do with synonyms, you can essentially do without synonyms also. They are a time-saving thing. They can save you some typing from typing having to deal with fully qualified names all the time. But they're something that there's almost always a way around them. But where they are very useful. So we're going to show you how we can use it in this case. What we're going to do is we're going to run a stored procedure here that changes our users table to just a different name temporarily. And then we're going to create a synonym. So actually, let's change it back for a second just so I can show you something. We're going to go ahead and open Database Explorer. Okay. We're going to go on the bar database here, and you'll see we have just John Smith in here. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead with our rename here. And we are going to create a synonym that's called the same thing as the table we're expected, but it's going to be for that other foo database that we just attached to. Okay, so we now have renamed our users table to something else, and we've created a synonym in its place that's pointing to an entirely different database. So now we're going to come back into Database Explorer and switch over here, and you can see I've got different data. That other database has an additional record in it. So without having to change anything code-wise or even database login information, I was able to access a table in another database. Now this could have been even on another server that I accessed it. So synonyms allow you to do things like that, and it doesn't just work with tables. It works with stored procedures. It works with functions. You can do it with many different objects in the database that you can create these aliases for, essentially. So let's go ahead and undo what we've done here and show you how easy it is to do that too. Just get things back in a good state. And then there we go. We're back to our original setup here. So, of course, things to note with this is that that change that I made isn't just for the user account. It is a system-wide change. So, you don't want to just go changing table names or creating synonyms for things that may be, in use under a different name already. You want to make sure you use it responsibly, but they can be very useful in that scenario. Okay, so now we're going to go back over here and take a look at some of the smaller features that we've added that they may be smaller features to list, but actually aren't very small features all the way around. First of them here is VDF GetAttribute Support. So this is something that it's something that we're actively working on. It is in the 12 product. It's something that will probably be expanded going forward so that we support more field and file attributes. that basically this will keep you from changing your code if you were on the data access driver and converting over to the Mertech driver here. The GetAttribute Support can lower the amount of changes that you have to make to your code. The second item here is context-sensitive help. We're really proud of this one. We're going to go ahead and take a look at this. It used to be, and in fact I'll show you on the menu, it used to be that the way you'd get to the help for the commands was to come in here, and we have our list of commands that are links, and there's really no searchability here. You can search the web page, of course, but that's about it. Now, in this version, although that remains right where it was, we've got a couple other things that we can do. So we're going to go in here and this is one of our new commands in relation to dealing with local DBs again, SQL Server attached DB. You'll see that when I hit F1, we got the Visual DataFlex help, but then we also got this topic found going to Mertech data. So Mertech, back when Data Access added the ability for third-party help, we had reserved a slot, and so we're now making use of that. So let's take a look here. We have this new help file that has all of our commands in it, and so you can now hit F1 on any Mertech command and come in and see examples, utilization, all of that right from here. Easy as pie. Now, one of the other things you'll notice here is that we have everything related to Mertech's help system now integrated into this help. So this is all of the PDF files, the HTML files, and the existing CHM file. Everything is now integrated into one help system for you that you can get to from the F1 key now. So should make it much easier to find things, and of course it means that you can come in here and do searches for commands and see the help on them right from here. So hopefully that'll help you in your development, speed things up for you that way. So we're very proud of this. It's something that we're improving as we go along here also. So the next item on that list there is the new Mertech support utility. So now let's take a look at that. Just clear some of this stuff out. The Mertech support utility was something that we created along the way to help with getting your environment set up. So it's actually used by the installer to help set up your environment, but it's available for you to use. So it's right on the under the Mertech folder here, Mertech support utility, and because it actually can affect things in program files for Windows 7, you have to, of course, pass up the wonderful UAC here. Okay, and you'll see here, Wizard describes it well. It helps you get the driver set up into a version of VDF. So in my case, all of the drivers are installed. If I just wanted to use, put the SQL driver in place, I can go ahead with that and copy that over. And it was a copy before that you had to do, but you'll notice there were dependent libraries to copy. And in fact, now with the addition of our integrated help file, there's the help file to copy, and so there's a few things to remember when you have to get set up with the new version of VDF. And so this will detect new versions. What you do, you come in here, you can see here, it goes through and figures out if you've got something already set up. So for 17, shows I'm completely good to go. I've got everything installed, but I went ahead and threw 16.1 on here. And of course that isn't set up at all, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we will come in here. And pull open the order entry example. And just to show you that it's working, I'll go ahead and do that, and you'll see that it's copied over that help file into the 16.1 folder along with the drivers. And so I'm good to go for this installation now. So when you add a new version of VDF, it makes things really, really easy. You know, it's one of those things that we're adding features to also as we go along. You know, thinking of new things that it can help you with, and so we've got a lot of ideas for this utility, and it's one of the areas that we thought we could help you out, and there's a lot more that we can do with it that we're planning on. So the next item I want to show you is back in the Flex2SQL utility, and this is the relationship synchronization tool. So I am going to go on the bar workspace here, and I need to switch workspaces over to order entry. Okay, so this on the maintenance menu, synchronize relationships. Actually, let's go like that. Okay, so one of the things that we've been doing as we progress version to version is lowering the number of items that need to be in the int file. You know, the ultimate goal, of course, would be to not need an int file at all to describe the connection to the backend database, to just read everything from the back end. We're not 100% there yet, but it's, of course, the direction we're headed. We've already done some work on indexes in that area, and this is another area that we've done some work on in this version. So you'll see here, what we have here is the description of all of the relationships for these tables. And you'll see that on the SQL side, there are none of those relationships. If we were to come in here on the bar database, yes, and create a database diagram of everything, you'll see that there's not much to look at here. It's just created a list of all of these tables. So although the relationships may be recognized on the VDF side of things, they're not recognized on the SQL side of things. So what we're going to do now is tell it to synchronize the SQL relationships with the relationships that are described in the int files. And that's it. I click the button. I'm done. You can see here that it now shows all of our relationships in the SQL table, and in fact, we're going to go over and show you what this does here. We will close that. We're going to create a new database diagram. And we're just going to select all files, tell it to go ahead and add. And you'll see here that it now recognizes the connections between all of these files. So we've got customer, order header, order detail, inventory, vendor. All of our relationships are live in the SQL database now. So you know, that's another step that you can use in getting closer to having everything be the same on the VDF side of things as it is on the SQL Server side. And in fact, the utility has the ability to send stuff the other direction as well. If you have relationships that have been defined on the other side in a separate tool, for instance, such as the SQL Server Management Studio or something else, you can send those relationships back the other way so that they're recognized in the int files. So this is just one more step in that direction. Let's switch back over here. The last item here, just want to mention, of course, that in our support with VDF17, you can do things like I've described here. This is what I could come up with that fit the absolute maximum file name and field names that are available. So, of course, if I recall right, we've got 31 characters here and 32 characters on the field side of things. So that's supported across all of the drivers, of course, as long as you're using VDF17. And in fact, in the Flex2SQL utility, one of the things you'll notice is the select workspace here. If you select a workspace for your file list, it will know when you pick VDF17 version that that file list can support the long file names and field names, so that if you're creating or editing fields in the utility here, it'll let you use those without breaking an old file list, for instance. So that's one of the new things in the migration utility also. So last up is what's next. We've got a lot of things that we're working on right now for future versions of Flex2SQL. Those were the major items that we have for this version. The performance improvements, LocalDB support, something that we're very excited about. We think you'll use a lot. And of course, filling out some of the rest of the feature sets across all of the drivers. So what's up next? Embedded SQL. This is compatibility with the data access SQL.pkg file. So if I come back over here, this is one of the examples that we're working with here. So in a SQL.pkg environment, all of the you have connection handles and a handle manager, and to allow you to use embedded SQL, stored procedures, things like that. We are making a compatibility layer for the Mertech drivers so that instead of doing this, you can do this. And there's not a huge amount more to say about it right now. We actually kind of like the way we have it set up. It ends up being a little bit less code overall. But of course, there's a lot of people who have existing code bases that are using SQL.pkg, and we want them to be able to use the Mertech driver, of course. So adding compatibility for that may also help people that just are hitting the F1 key and looking for SQL help. They'll be able to use the data access help and know that it'll work right along with our driver also. So as you can see here, it takes a little bit more code the other way, but we're adding full compatibility for that that'll require only very minor changes to existing code. So that's one of the areas that we're working on in the future. And of course, the help and documentation improvements will continue as we go along. We've got more things that we're working on in that area. And of course, there's other items on the table that we're not ready to let you know about just yet, but there's a lot going on. We've made tons of improvements, and that's Flex2SQL version 12. So if we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Oliver,
yes.
Yeah, it's a question. What kind of sizes and limitations are there for the LocalDB database?
LocalDB has a, I think the size limit on it right now, it stands at a 4 GB database. There is no limitations in relation to connections or anything like that. Since it's not a network-based product, of course, you don't have any of those limitations. So they allow a 4 GB database, though, so it should work for the majority of cases that that have this single user setup, it would be unusual to see them go above that size.
Yeah, and one of the things that we want to clarify is that this LocalDB database is fully compatible with any other Microsoft servers, so SQL servers. So you could potentially develop your entire system in the LocalDB database and then ship it to the customers, and with just a attach detach, I guess, you will be able to attach it to any server. Is that
correct? Correct. It's absolutely the same file format that's used across all their products. This is just another version of SQL Server 2012. So like for the instance of Flex2Crystal, the method that we took in shipping the database there was to simply detach the database after we had it ready and then include it as part of the installer, and then we had code in place to do an attach on the other side, and that's it.
So, one way that I see the usage of this would be something like I ship in my installer, I ship an empty database, which would be a LocalDB database. I have all the tables, everything created, and the customers at the customer side during the installation process, you would just have some script to attach it to the customer's SQL Server, and boom, you're ready to go. Instead of maybe some of you ship scripts, some of you have existing customer sites where they do the migration, but this could be one interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. The LocalDB, the use cases in that area are actually pretty extensive. There's people using it that way. It's one of those things that I expect in the future, in the coming years, to actually expand quite a bit in relation to, for instance, mobile development of SQL applications with Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8, being put onto tablets, things like that. It was really created as a response to those scenarios. All of the other platforms out there have this very powerful local database. Most of them use an open source tool actually for it, and Microsoft really didn't have a solution. This SQL LocalDB is a great solution because it is very, very fast, but they didn't break compatibility with everything. It just works. You can detach a database, go and attach it to an enterprise-level SQL server, and then let a DBA go and customize logins and all of that stuff without any problem.
Yeah. So how would developers install it? Like, is there a simple installer that they can ship out? Is it distributable as a part of your licensing, that if you use LocalDB, you can download installer and ship with your application?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a completely free product. Just like SQL Express, there's no licensing cost for it, and literally it's this installer, and you can pass a command line to make it silent. But even as you're going through it with this installer, even if you didn't make it silent, I think there is 2 buttons to click and no options. Literally, it's that easy along the way. And if you go in here to our blog, the Flex2SQL blog, we actually did a post on this a little ways back. I think it's on the second page here. Okay, version 12 new feature, MS SQL LocalDB. Right on here, this is how I always remember exactly where to find it, is right from the blog post. The Microsoft link here has all of the SQL Express, if it ever comes up. It has all of the SQL Express LocalDB installers. So you can see here, 64-bit, it's a 33 meg install, 27 meg install for x86, and it is truly a separate product. So if you wanted management for it, as you'll see, I have management installed here. That's a separate download and a much bigger download. This is a very, very small installation. It's meant to be fast. There's no services to deal with even that you have to make sure are running. Just logging into the database gets everything started up.
And in terms of the client libraries, that's all installed as a part of this installer, right? The native client?
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to do anything that way. All of that's set up for you, and anything that we need, of course, is handled by the Mertech installer. So as long as our installer pushes anything else out that may be needed for development or anything like that, so you'll never have to deal with that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, there's this question about GetAttribute. You had shown a slide about GetAttribute support. I think we wanted to just clarify that, well, GetAttribute command itself is supported, but what we are doing is that there are some attributes that our driver needs, there are some attributes that Visual DataFlex needs, and some of them do not apply to non-DataFlex databases like SQL or Oracle. So in the past, we have kind of let it slide, or we just return some defaults. So what we are doing now is that making sure that all of those attributes that are being called from other drivers, whether it's pervasive or other SQL drivers or whatever, we will support them in the sense that either we'll return a default value or some other value rather than let it just drop through and you get an unsupported attribute error. So it's just a part of cleaning up. If you are using our SQL drivers with Visual DataFlex, you will probably not see any of the impact of that, but it's mostly for people who are switching from pervasive or other SQL drivers that we are doing this. The other thing, Oliver, you showed relationship. I mean, that's something that we had it in version 11, but we keep improving some of those features. So it's not something new. You've probably already seen that. But what we are doing is, the overarching theme behind version 11 was that how can we be more independent in designing our data models outside of the DataFlex tools. And right now, there are some limitations which ties us to the DataFlex runtime, where we have to do things in a certain way, like index numbers and index names and things like that. But overlaps have gone out, so we don't need to store them in the INT file. The relationship is the other information that's stored in the INT file. And by doing this, we're kind of moving away from that. So the idea is that you should be able to create your entire data model in some native tool like Toad or whatever you prefer. I think it was the other company, Redgate. And basically, you should be able to just connect to that and write application against that using our drivers. The other thing is that other developers who might be accessing that same data, having that relationship allows them to write better code themselves. So they know that the relationships are there, how it is affecting, so they're not going to go and do things separately, but make everything more harmonious in the environment. We see this normally, especially when we go to a new customer who is already using SQL. There's a big resistance from the people who are not using DataFlex and how DataFlex does development and how we want to make changes to the back end. And of course, we have been doing this for 15 years. We have been always centric, DataFlex centric, that we're moving customers out of DataFlex, but now in this environment, it's a mixed bag of tools. So we want to make sure that we exist harmoniously in that environment and not create any problems for other tool vendors, other tools who might want to access the same data.
The other thing to mention about LocalDB is that, and I put it on the slide there, is that it is actually a really good alternative to the native DataFlex files. It's very, very fast. You're going to see speeds very close to or the same as DataFlex files, but you get other advantages along the way, such as the ability to have stored procedures and to do SQL queries on the data, that are standard SQL queries. Even if it's a single user local application, there are advantages to that. And of course, unlike DataFlex files, these can be accessed from other tools. I mean, you can put in the server address and the database into plenty of other tools and get access to that data, so that if you, for instance, wanted to let your customer access them from even something as simple as Excel, to be able to download the data so that they can look at it in Excel, that's an easy thing to do if you're using it this way. Whereas, of course, with DataFlex files, that's not an easy thing to do. So, there's some real advantages there. And, of course, I think it's very important for developers also because, especially if you've only worked with DataFlex files locally, starting out with a SQL environment is going to get you in a different mindset as you're working with your product. It'll let you see things that you can do using embedded SQL, for instance, that maybe in DataFlex would have run really slow. Using embedded SQL can be very fast. So if you have that as your base work environment, I think it'll really expand what you're doing with your code base.
Yeah. And one reason why we are putting so much effort into LocalDB support and making it easy to do this, because first of all, it's like Oliver said, it's very lightweight and it's easy to distribute. So if you have a distributed environment where you have traveling salespeople who take a laptop out, go out somewhere, and then do their work, they bring it in, you can synchronize the database much more easily doing this. But from our point of view, as you guys know, that we have this Flex2 Crystal product that supports Crystal Reports 2008 and onwards. We don't support native DataFlex database. So one of the things we want to do is make it easy for you, if you are interested in using Crystal Reports and continuing to use Crystal Reports, is to make this very easy for those smaller sites where you have native DataFlex database. Go with this kind of an engine where it's almost zero maintenance. I think there's no maintenance at all, completely hidden. The user doesn't see anything in terms of load on the server or load on the local machine. It's just there like a native DataFlex data file, and you'll be able to support your Crystal reports with that. So if you have any more questions. All right. Oliver, over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you all for following along today. The release of version 12 is scheduled for mid-October. I don't remember the exact date. Riaz, do you have the exact date we were planning on yet?
Well, we are shooting for second to third week of October, depending on the beta feedback we get. So I encourage you all to try out, give it a shot, at least give us some feedback. It's much more helpful for us when you test the product while we are in beta rather than after the release. We have to release it at some point in time. So we should have it by in the second or third week of October.
Yeah, this driver has had one of the things that I can say for sure about it is that it has had a ton of testing against it already. We've tested some very large code bases against it, and we know what to expect from it. We know how it's working. So I think you guys will all have a great time with this release. It's going to be a very reliable, strong version of the drivers with lots of features, hopefully, that you guys will make use of. The LocalDB is something that even if you may be using a different driver, is something to definitely take a look at. So thank you all for coming, and like we said, second, third week of October for release. Go ahead and download the beta and give it a try. Have a good day.